Okay, we're live. Welcome back to the green room. We have a very special guest today. His name is Bill Hackett. I'll let him introduce himself. But this is the title of this episode is called "Magic in a Bottle," and there's a reason. And I think when you start hearing these stories at the end of the session, you'll understand why. So, Bill, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, and we'll start telling some stories
And how you know
Yeah.
us.
and how you know us.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. Bill Hackett. I've been in the contact center industry for 25 years now, 25 plus. I've had the opportunity to lead operations for contact centers for Home Depot, the General, NCO Group, which is an outsourcer, which is where I met Jon and Scott. And it's been quite a few years now. But I think when I look back and we think of the magic or lightning in the bottle, I look back to that time because that was really a rewarding time, a fun time, and just an opportunity to disrupt the business and change the business. And I had the opportunity to meet you both there when I was leading the NCO outsourcing operations. And I know you were with a large big box retailer at the time, and you were looking for a solution to help build and grow your program. And it's the rest. We'll take it from there is kind of history.
Yeah, so we had a chance to
Best Buy?
recently.
Is that who you're talking about?
It was Best Buy. You can say the big yellow tag. That's fine. Or the orange
Free
tag.
marketing.
Geek
I
Squad.
mean, come on.
But we had recently caught up at a golf event that we had here in Colorado, and we started telling stories. And I thought the audience would get a kick out of it's inspiration, frankly, about the work we did in the time that we did it, and the results the results that we had that were remarkable, if I would say that. And I would say, Bill, our relationship with Bill, and Jon, maybe you could tell the story about how we got into sales at Best Buy, right, through the phone. Now, this is a retailer that didn't understand they had websites and phone channels and those kinds of things. How we went from, where we were when we started, which was almost zero revenue on the phone, to where we ended up in 2009.
Yeah, really quick. So back in 2002, when I joined Best Buy, the spring, it was actually May of 2002. We were thinking about, these customers that were unserved in mobile phones were taking off, and we were starting to do, a lot more SMS and messaging going on and a lot more information flow. And Scott, you and I talked about this for years before, how we could drive commerce through mobile. And again, if you think back to 2002, this was more of how they kind of were really just starting to put websites on mobile phones, or, links that were exposed to commerce and to looking up product and those kind of things. So anyway, fast forward, I get into Best Buy and I'm trying to find, any way to eke in a differentiator, which is my play always, and was doing some reporting and found out that this was when Grand Theft Auto, the video game, was just coming to market, and we didn't have a site to pre-order software. And I did some reporting, and we had some technology at, I don't know, 20 stores, Scott, or something like that,
Yeah.
that would record the calls, and we could go back and listen to them. So I spent probably 2 weeks literally slogging through hundreds and hundreds of calls and finding out that through reporting and through some other things that I was able to pull together from POS and some other, reporting info that I got my hands onto, I realized that, we had this huge inundation of customers calling the store saying, when is Grand Theft Auto 2 coming out? And I went to the entertainment director at the time and said, hey, how many titles did you buy? And I can't remember what he said, but it was, it was a small amount or, medium amount. And I said, well, if I do this at scale based on the number of stores that we have and kind of assume a very conservative number, we're probably under buying by at least 200,000 titles. And so that started the ball around, hey, there's this phone thing out there that's really kind of a hidden target or hidden set of revenue that nobody's really thinking about. And because, to your point, we're in a retail environment where the store was everything. .com was a smidgen, right? If I remember walking into the
Yep.
.com building, and it was like, oh, we sold enough that equaled 2 stores today. And I remember that being on that little plaque, and it would change. And so I basically said, okay, how can we do this? And so without budget and without a lot of, I mean, we were flying under the radar for the most part because we were a rounding error on the rounding error. I said, let's try to figure out how to sell more on the phones, because people are driving by stores everywhere in the US and wanting to pick up this stuff. And again, this was before in-store pickup was big. It was before the access was even there. And so we really had that thought that there was an untapped market in phone sales that we could add to the top line of Best Buy and be a material difference to the revenue. But I needed a good vendor to do that, and a good partner that could help me figure out all the things that we didn't do really well as a company, which, call center stuff wasn't really our bag of tricks, right? We had a lot of structure around building business and, operating, but when it came to, figuring out how to sell over the phone, I needed a good partner that could do that. And we had a current provider that did all the kind of computer warranty hardware support, but nobody that really understood the deep and wide catalog of Best Buy and what we could actually sell and how we could promote and do secret shopping or do personalized shopping. And the opportunities were endless. And that's where I met Bill when he was at NCO, when we were looking for a partner that, quite frankly, was different, felt like they were Best Buy, an extension of Best Buy. And to the point of this whole episode, how could we capture magic in a bottle or lightning in a bottle so that the phone actually was above the radar versus below the radar? And it took us a little bit, but through the help of Bill and his team at NCO, we made that happen.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we did a little test with trying to get tech support people to sell, and it was absolute miserable failure. It was one of the worst
They
tests.
they hated it too, right? I mean,
It was
they just
not.
wanted to fix.
Yeah, it was not a positive thing for those listening. Trying to get tech people to sell, tech support people to sell is not an easy task, and it just culturally wasn't aligned with what they did. They wanted to help people, not sell people. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's different connecting people with goods and services and getting them motivated to buy versus, I have trouble with my PC. So anyway,
So that was more Best Buy driven and BestBuy.com driven, because that's where we had the access to log in on behalf of a customer and actually place the order for them. And then we had to change their password. It was a mess.
there was a few teams, and there's a few teams within Best Buy who wanted to build call centers, and I laid out a capital plan for them. And there's like, I could open more stores and sell hundreds of millions of dollars with more stores with that capital. Can you do that? And my response would be, well, I could sell a little, but I don't think I could sell as much as a store could. Right. So that's why we had to, that's why we have to, but we didn't have the capital to go invest ourselves. And frankly, it was the best decision we ever made was to find Bill and the NCO team down in Houston.
Yeah. I don't know. And then again, this was a timing thing. Best Buy was flying up the radar. I think we had just knocked off Circuit City at the time. Circuit was going down because they couldn't reinvent their stores and their footprint, and the brand was kind of tired. In-store pickup came along. Geek Squad all of a sudden happened with, a couple of us that were trying to figure out how to scale that particular model. And it all triangulated into the phone. And again, where Best Buy didn't do phones very well, or at least, consumer relations we did, but really that was in response. It wasn't a proactive or, a very sales driven organization like the Blue Shirts and out in the stores. So we just needed somebody that could help us kind of curve jump that whole, hey, it's going to take us a year to get up to speed and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, Bill, when you and I first met, it was in Houston in your call center. It was an old Walmart that you had repurposed. You were doing some MCI calls in there, if everyone remember the MCI brand. And I remember walking in, and this was on our world tour of checking out 3 or 4 different suppliers in the BPO space and business process outsourcer space. And I remember we walked in and you walked right up to me, shook my hand really hard, and said, "Just wait, I'll show you what's going on around here." And you took the ball from there. And after that, I was trying to catch up and keep up. But maybe you can share a little bit about what our first interaction was and how you looked at the opportunity of Best Buy and then Geek Squad sales at the same time, and kind of what that looked like to you at that time, and we can talk about how our partnership helped facilitate that.
No, I appreciate that. And, at that time we were just exiting MCI telecommunications. If you remember MCI back in the day, and we were one of 12 contact centers, 13 contact centers. And the interesting thing about MCI, and I felt like they were ahead of their time, like 20 years ahead of their time. They were amazing, from recognition rewards programs, from leadership development programs, from operational execution reporting. They were really amazing. And we used to compete against 13 contact centers, right? And you were listed as the top contact center, 5th place, 10th place. And we had an interesting hybrid there where the leadership, the managers and above, were MCI, and the supervisors and below were all an outsourcer. And so it was really an interesting hybrid. And we competed against all these other contact centers over the course of several years. And, I was very proud that we ranked number one multiple times. We took the top contact center spot as an outsourcer, which was really unheard of. And so we had this great.
You had those banners hanging, right? You had those banners,
right?
And I remember looking at those when we walked in and going, "Wow, they're the top call center for MCI, month over month over month, year over year," kind of thing, right?
And that was the thing, is we had this just magic of performance management, excitement, energy. And when MCI decided to dissolve, when that transaction began, I knew we had something special with the people and the leadership. And when we heard there was an opportunity to fill that contact center, or at least pilot a program like yours, there's a lot of energy and excitement. And the amazing thing is, nobody left. We were able to retain all our employees because they believed in what we were doing. We were a top call center, a top performing. And again, not against one or two. We were competing against 13 contact centers. So we knew we had magic there, and we knew we could deliver solid results. So when we heard this opportunity was coming and you were visiting us, you didn't have to set the tone with the leadership or the agents. It was already there. There was this enthusiasm and excitement about meeting this, and the agents wanted to show what we could do, and the leadership wanted to show what we could do. I just orchestrated it, right? And, I always say the leader kind of sets the tone. And so we had this mentality of every day is a game day, every day you win. And so when you came and Scott came down and we started interacting, you had the opportunity to meet with our agents in closed door focus groups. And the great thing was, it was all organic and was all natural. They were so proud of the results that they delivered. They knew they could carry that over to whatever business we did. And so you think you go from telecommunications, supporting and servicing telephony, to now you're supporting retail. Think of Geek Squad, more of a combination of troubleshooting, customer service, and selling, all rolled into one. So very dynamic. And then dispatch. And I think over the course of time, we ended up adding 27 programs under the umbrella of Best Buy, which is pretty amazing. But going back to us meeting, I think you had the opportunity to go and really discover that, oh, this isn't normal. There's this excitement and enthusiasm and belief in what we're doing and belief in what we can deliver. And so we just build on that from there. You met with the leadership team, had your discussions with our executive group, and I think you brought down larger members of the Best Buy organization to meet the teams and the groups. And then we went into, I think, the decision-making process, and one is your provider, and you can kind of share of what maybe that differentiator was. But
yeah, it was interesting.
I'll just share when we went live, it was just.
Yeah, when we, to that point, and I think we got a little bit of a delay here, but when we were sitting at dinner that night after we had met your team, I remember sitting across from I think it was Chuck Burns and Corsi and you, and I remember Chuck saying to me, we really want your business. And I remember that being kind of that was like that quintessential point of the whole process of, you know, everybody else that we had talked about wanted the Best Buy brand and the logo and the Geek Squad brand and the logo. But this was the first time that somebody actually said, we really want your business. They were selling, and you guys were selling to us. And sales is what we were looking for. We knew that the Blue Shirts and the Geek Squad folk, they could sell their services. And we knew that's the culture that we wanted to extend within the brand. And you were the first provider that kind of came to us and said, we really want your business. And I think that tone, to your point about the leader sets the tone, even within your organization, you were primarily a third party billing and collections company, at least for a lot of the roots of what NCO was. And we thought, wow, if we could just culturize these guys a little bit and get them to attach with our brand a little bit and get excited about it, I think we could do different than just reacting to some people driving by a store at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and saying, hey, I'm looking for this computer. Do you have it in stock so I can stop? And again, because we didn't have in-store pickup at the time and the tools weren't necessarily mature enough, but people really wanted to, as they're driving by stores, they wanted to engage. And what better way to engage than I want your business, and to tell them that we wanted their business, and you and the team at NCO at the time really helped me understand that was the decision that we need to make. And then I made sure that I drove as much of that influence as I could
Yeah.
within the internal team.
And keep in mind, we didn't have sales, right? So this was starting from zero. We had
And no
nowhere to go
budget.
but up.
And no budget.
We had no budget. We had no focused tools. We had no process. We had no feedback on what it was going to be like to sell on the phone. I think they sold through the website in our first pass before we created better tools for that.
Yep.
And so this wasn't an exercise in optimizing sales across providers. This was an exercise in creating from scratch, right? Seeing an opportunity, listening to our customers first and foremost, John. Them telling, it's like, why can't I just buy over the phone?
Yeah.
And we're like, why couldn't they? Right. And so we actually didn't have it enabled. People would call us and just assume it, that we're a cataloger, that we would take these orders, and we didn't have a means to do it. So we spun this up from zero. And I think, Bill, what the magic was at the site, from the day we said go, I think we had maybe 50 people trained in
I
sales.
don't even think that many.
Maybe 30.
Yeah.
Right. And we went down there, and you would tell us, it's like, look, they're trying to sell, but we can't do this. We can't do that. There's a system limitation. There is a process limitation. We need to change. And it's like, well, here's the things I've already changed and what happened. And then we would take the things that you couldn't change, like, let's say, an offline website that we could use for selling or reporting or whatever it is. And so this was this constant kind of feedback and development on both sides to build what it was. And it was all about people engagement, right? Listening to the employees. They wanted to sell, and we would give them every avenue or every barrier, if you will, to not sell because of how bad the tools were. And they would do it despite us, which is what I think I loved about the experience coming down there. And, my personal experience with how engaged the people were in selling, I think the first season, John and I came down, and you said, what you should do is you should do a contest on the phone and take calls for them. And you and John should compete for sales revenue. Right. So literally like, okay, great, let's do it. And we jumped on the phone for an hour each, side by side, just selling, and everybody was laughing at us, and we were having a fun time with it. But it enabled people. We're all part of the same dream, which is this thing kept growing. And then Geek Squad came along, and we started doing Geek Squad sales. And everybody at Best Buy was telling us that you'd never sell over the phone, right? It was all about an in-store experience. They really didn't even believe in the website and e-commerce, to be honest. Back in 2003, 2004, it was still 3% of sales. I think today it's 35%.
Unproven. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
35% of sales today. But it was all about getting energy built up, Bill. I think you were the linchpin in guiding us to improve process and tools up in the mothership, while you were enabling people to do the best that they could, and having fun and selling and building the sales atmosphere. And it had nothing, one of the things we keep talking about, I think part of this construct was, in a typical BPO relationship, everything is contracted, right? The experience is contracted, the results are contracted, the process is contracted, the tools are contracted. And it's so structured that it doesn't enable you to write yourself into the story. And I think the part of the magic was that you did was you kept your leaders at bay when they said we need more structure. And John and I kept our leaders at bay when they said we need to contract, when procurement's like, we need a better contract, we need to secure more metrics, blah, blah, blah. And we try to keep them out of the mix. And I think that partnership that we had to enable the people, to enable you to do what you did best, and you tell us what was broken in the system that we could go fix upstream. And just that tension that we created between the two parties had nothing to do with contract. It had everything to do with people engagement,
Yeah, and
a
I think
belief
that
that we're building something special, abnormal results, and we just rode that wave, frankly, for probably 6 years. It just kept growing. And I think, John, what was the dollar amount that we ended up with? We went from zero sales over the phone to hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Yeah, we were right around 400 million, I think, in revenue when I left in 2009. But Bill, you were there for a little bit longer after that, but I think. But
yeah,
I don't know. You can share a little bit about how that engagement went from your seat, Bill, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as
sure.
well.
Well, it's interesting. So we grew that program, and it was 50 agents of what we launched with,
Oh,
and we
was it?
grew that from 50 agents to, I think when I left, you think about peak season, holiday season, we were over 1,500 agents. I mean, I
Mhm.
think we were knocking on the door of 2,000, 4 contact centers. So think about it. We started with this little pilot program of 50 agents in Houston, Texas. In 7 years, we were in 4 contact centers, one in Panama City, Panama. We were in Sarnia and Vancouver, Canada. We were in Joplin, Missouri. And so we had 4 full contact centers based on this little program that started with a pilot. And I remember when we still had MCI in that building. They're like, you're never, kind of to your point, no one's going to want to buy this stuff over the phone. You're never going to sell this $200 to fix a computer. I had belief, and my team had belief, and we knew we could do it. And whatever you gave us, we were going to knock it out of the park, and we were going to drive it. But there was that skepticism from everybody. And I will say, going back to how we grew and how your business grew too, is I see this with BPOs that I have partnered with over the years, where there's a lot of focus sometimes on contract and the billable minute, the billable hours, the occupancy guarantee. Where when we worked with you, it was more about how do we grow this business collectively as partners, and the rewards will come right on both ends. If we're successful, your brand's going to grow, our business is going to grow. So we minimize the distractions in the contract and just talked about how do we create a genuine customer experience, how do we optimize our sales opportunities, and how do we grow this. And then 7 years later, we're at 50 heads to close to 2,000. You're now at $400 million. I can't remember a handful of times where we had these discussions about billable minutes, occupancy,
Handle
guarantees. It was
time.
all about how do we do this together as partners. And I've tried to take that with me wherever I've gone. In my career, is that mentality of true partnership and building the business and trust. And I think that was really a lot of the magic there. And I'll say when we launched that program, you two did a fantastic job of just ensuring you're delivering us. These are our core values. These are our expectations. And we took that, we advocated it, we communicated that, whether it's team huddles, we did a compelling, do you remember the compelling stories contest we ran, where we did a contest with our contact center agents when they helped a customer in the moment and made a differentiating experience for them. And they did an essay on that. Then we videotaped them
Yeah.
telling a story. That bubbled up all the way to your CEO, right? And that was just the magic
Yep.
of doing those things. About, it's not just putting core values on a wall, it's living and breathing it and showing examples of that. So whether it was team huddles, recognition programs, these scenarios of how we guys them understand what these core values are, how we deliver them. And then it was, what are our objectives? What are our goals? How do we create energy and excitement and sustain it? And you'll remember the kickoff, right? When we kicked that thing off, it was setting the tone. And I'll never forget this because we launched this and it was pretty crazy, right? We created this scenario where we had this tunnel and our agents came out of the tunnel. We had the smoke going like the Miami Hurricanes, strobe lights blasting or flickering out throughout the contact center. And of course, welcome to the jungle blaring. They ran through the high five line and it was on. And we never looked back. From there was just this energy and passion and excitement. And that's how you set the tone, right? And we did that. We set the tone, we had arrived, and now we're delivering. And I go back to the leadership sets the tone. And then it just evolved into the stuff we talked about, the partnerships, the customer insights, the funneling up information, the acting on that information, the closed looping the information back to the agents. And both of you did a really good job of doing that when we bubble up information, challenges, opportunities. But the partnership we developed and some of the innovation back then, we created, a tech lab. We're selling and working to solve computer issues and problems. We created a lab with computers, iPods back in the day, Magnolia Home Theater. Our agents are going through those labs, kicking the tires, becoming experts on the products they're supporting. That was amazing. And that was just a small example of that ongoing partnership and innovation, because you said this earlier on in our discussion. We're an extension of the brand. We're talking to 10,000 customers, chatting with 3,000 customers, emailing 1,000. That's 14,000 opportunities to make a difference in a customer's life, to solve a problem, to be an extent, to be an advocate and make that impression. And that comes from partnership and communication from that client to that vendor, and that's one partner differentiating experience for customers.
Yeah, the one thing I really appreciated about, and we ended up having, leaders come down from headquarters, and Brian Dunn had come down when he was the CEO or the president, and number of leaders in the regional area in Houston, and Dallas and Houston were a big markets for us. But I remember you always basically would meet everyone at the front door, and you would say, feel free to ask anyone on the floor anything you want, but make sure you ask them about what their goals are and what their impacts are. But the hidden kind of nugget that you always kind of promoted was, you knew whoever anybody talked to, you knew how long they'd been with the company, you knew their family, you knew their husband or wife or significant other or their children or their dog or whatever. And the level of just engagement at the people at the people level, so that they could again feel like they were writing themselves into this bigger story, Scott, that you were talking about, that really again set a different tone, right? And I remember when Brian Dunn came in and you basically said, go ask anyone on the floor what it is that we're here for. And they had they checked off the list and they went, and here's why I'm passionate about selling and supporting the products and technology that Best Buy is there. And we love this brand and it's fun. And again, it's a fun brand to be a part of, and electronics is not, saving lives and all those kind of things. But in all reality, I don't think it's the product or the service. I think it's the enabling your leaders, and how you enabled your leaders to not only enable the agents, but also to really make sure they understood what the core needs were from an experience level, not necessarily from a contract level, back to Scott, what you were talking about up front, and making sure that they've just really felt enabled by the whole process. And that's when it becomes much bigger than I can control or Scott can control or whatever. And I think that was a big part of our brand, was I wanted to give away control. instead of taking it all in and trying to orchestrate everything. I think let's set the ball in motion and then step away from the body, if you will, right? And let you do what you do great. And to Scott's point, we'll figure out how we can eliminate as many barriers. And I just remember on a regular basis, you would be like halfway through the month, you'd call me up and go, "Hey, what's the next sales goal?" Because we just blew your monthly goal out of the water. We have 15 days left in the month. And it was always like I was trying to keep up with you, and I was trying to set the right expectation with my leader and my managers and leaders and whatever, and not trying to sandbag, but I was also not trying to do too much and go, wow, I'm going to burn you guys out. And so we had to figure out how to really make that kind of back and forth work. But I just remember the way that you enabled your leaders, the way that they enabled the agents, and how that came into kind of frame for us was, Scott, when you and I were working on some projects, and we worked with Accenture on a really fun kind of experience road mapping exercise or experience anchor exercise. Maybe you can share a little bit about how your experience was with that experience anchors and how we enabled Bill's team down at the contact center and contact centers to really take that and accelerate it into that hockey stick growth.
Yeah. So my experience in contact center management was process development and tools development. And I thought I could create a better process through tools and through process work and defining how a call should go and defining what an agent should say
Control, right?
and having that control. So there's years of, kind of throughout this cycle as Bill's team grew, we kept hearing from the agents, and Jon kept pressuring me. It's like you should really look at some of this experience anchor work we're doing with Accenture. It's really, I think it's going to be our next wave, if you will. And I'm like, nah, you're crazy. That's all the soft frilly stuff. I'm not. That's not my, that's not my ball of wax, so to speak.
Well,
So it's
because
like, eh.
our CSAT scores were going up at the time, right? No, they were
No,
like this.
our CSAT scores, we're taken to a place. Our close rates were starting to normalize, and everything was kind of starting to get into a rhythm, and we'd still hit sales goals. We'd still get to another level of sales, but it wasn't progressing like it did in the past. And so, one of the times I was down in Houston, and Bill wanted me to talk to a few people. And Jon, I don't think you were there for that one. I think I was down there just listen as a listening post, and they said, these processes are really hard to follow, and I think I could do a better. I'm paraphrasing, but I think if we just said something a little different, or had people do them how they wanted to sell, would be better than this structured way that you're imposing a little bit on the agents. So I took that a little bit to heart, and Jon finally convinced me to go into the experience anchor development cycle, and we came up with some really cool connected experience anchors, things like fun, right? We wanted the customer to have fun, interacting with us. We're not selling,
Access.
brain surgery here. We're selling fun stuff that people enjoy, electronics wise, music, movies, the whole 9 yards, games. Anyway, so we came up with these experience anchors, and it'll circle back to you, Bill, I promise. And we developed these. We came down to the contact center to get feedback on these experience anchors from the agents. And we presented it to them like, what do you think about trying to redesign the program to make people feel these 5 things? Fun was one of them. And I can't remember. Education was one of
Access,
them.
trust.
Trust.
Yep.
And I think you said, Bill, I don't know, maybe we should just take away their score sheet and just put these 5 things in front of them. Right. And I'm like, okay, let's test that. Right. Let's test that with the agents. And I think, we didn't tell our leaders what we were doing. You had to kick Bob Corsi out of the room. Like, Bob, stop worrying about it, but you're changing SOP, the contract. And it's like, Bob, just leave. And you literally, I think, took Bob out of the room, if I remember correctly. And so we implement this thing with a team of 20 people. And, our CSAT's been level as a whole team for 6-8 months, right? It goes up and down a few percentage points. And all of a sudden it's up 18%. I'm like, what the hell did we just do? And we just took things away from the agent right, and said, write yourself into the sales cycle, right? And make sure the customer feels these things at the end of a call. No more process checkpoints. No more of this. Did you open the call correctly? Did you close the call correctly? All that crap. And, all of a sudden sales conversion is up like 28% or 30% or something like that. And our dollars are way up. And I thought to myself, I've been looking at in the contact center for 20 years, and I've been looking at it the wrong way the entire time. And it was all because of your leadership.
Yeah, Scott, was really just
The agents were connected to emotional things, not process things. And I think that's, if you weren't there, that would have never happened.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I look back and it was really just infusing behavior-based quality, right?
Sure.
And we did it collectively and together. And I wanted to comment though on a comment that John had made about you have the CEO come into the company, and pretty bold statement when you have 500 plus agents in a call center and say go out and talk to any of them. But I believe that because the things that we did in this is kind of I don't see this as much as I used to, but I kid you not, every morning, the first thing you do is you drop off your bag and you go shake every single agent's hand on the floor. And that sounds like cliche, but no, it's real. And that's what we do. You'd go out, and that was a requirement of all the managers too. You go out and you greet every single agent every morning. And when your night shift comes in, you do the same thing. So there's not a day that goes by that you haven't shaken the hand of every one of your agents. And that's why we were so confident to say, go ahead and talk to them, because we invested in our people. We made those deposits. And I think that's something that just needs to carry on if you're really going to have a differentiator in your provider, whether it's internal, external. I think that's just so important.
Yeah,
and then
you'll never be
Scott,
able
as you were saying,
sorry, Bill, you'll never be able to, my point of view, contract those extraordinary results from that people enablement that you led at the contact center. None of that is contracted.
But what it also did was it said that I don't have to be a type A personality or an introvert, an extrovert, or whatever. If I can bring some of these anchors to the table, if I can make my customer trust me and trust the advice that I gave them around this product or this or whatever, then that made Bill's job easier too, because then I don't have as much churn within the contact center. And we didn't have a ton of churn, Bill, did we? I mean, it was a brand that allowed you to bring yourself to the table, bring yourself and your skills of how you interacted and created relationships with our customers and made that flourish, right? And it didn't create this distance between the top sellers being all type A and badgering for the sale. It actually created a really interesting mix of some a little more quiet, some a little bit more mature, some a little younger. It just depended on how well they could internalize those experience anchors, right, Bill? I mean, that to me was the magic.
Yeah, and two things I'll say about that. So I had the opportunity to lead a lot of captive companies, and the churn rate at an outsourcer is usually, from what I've experienced, double, if not triple. I can look back in my career and say that 7 years, we ran on par with any captive company I've ever had the opportunity to lead.
Yeah.
That's how well we were able to engage with our people. And so, implementation of initiatives like propensity to leave reviews, ensuring that we're partnering with our recruiting team, our HR team, identifying what's causing, opportunities or challenges for agents, and having the managers talk on a weekly basis about these are the steps that we're taking to retain or to address these problems for our associates. And so we implemented these propensity to leave programs and reviews, and that really helped us. Optimizing training, where we're now enabling agents to do assessments on the trainers, the curriculum, the delivery, versus just did they pass their test? No, what is the feedback? How do we optimize our training based on that feedback the associates are providing? And I'd say that I wanted to circle back to Scott's point about enablement. One of the things that was implemented during that time through you and Scott with us was, you called it FastPath at the time, but you created this program or process through an online portal where associates, FastPath. I've tried to replicate that everywhere I've gone. And I've been able to Fast pipe. So through disguised different names, we've implemented it. One company I called it Quick
Yeah.
Path, another was Customer Insights. But it's grown and optimized over the years. But that initial concept that you created, where if associates recognized a customer having friction, if they identified a business process opportunity, they could identify that, submit that through an online portal. That would then route to the business partners. And then you could quantify that, feed it into speech analytics, right? And back at that time, we didn't have speech analytics. Fortunately, it's evolved now where you can do that. But that was really enabling the agent to say, wow, I have a voice on this. And then as that program grew from not just submitting friction points or business process opportunities, but now you're pulling in your business partners. You're now having monthly sessions on, how many issues occurred? What is the impact of the customer? What is the value of solving this? How do we put this on the IT project log? It's evolved into that, but it all started for this concept and mindset that you brought to us back in 2005, and it's evolved since then. But that really enabled the agents to say, well, I have a voice. They care, what I'm saying, what I'm seeing, and how my customer's impacted, and they're working to fix it. So that was a game changer early on in that relationship.
Yeah.
That was a really cool mechanism. It ended up evolving to, we had a call, I think once a month with all of our BPO partners at the same time, just to be transparent about what it is that we're fixing, it's taking longer to fix or a bigger investment than we thought it might be. But what I really loved about that Fast Five process was, if it was a process change, we would just say, okay, change it. Right? We didn't wait for a contract cycle. We didn't wait for a metrics chain in a contract. We just said, if it doesn't add value, just stop doing it.
Right.
Like I remember tracking stuff in Clarify, and the agent's like, I don't know how I can even track this stuff in our CRM platform. It takes me forever to figure it out. We said, just stop doing it. And then we ended up figuring out how to minimize it and narrow it down. But we said, okay, let's stop. And
we built tools because of it, right? I mean, we didn't have the capital to go and build sales tools, but that's really what we needed right at that time. And a lot of what we looked at and what Bill's team helped us realize is there were a lot of products that Best Buy didn't carry that people were asking about. And one of the things that I loved about the relationship, and people ask me, how did you get all these sales tools and knowledge base and some of those things built? And I remember going to, NCO's leadership team with Bill and going, hey, you guys are paying us per minute for all the calls and all the heads and all that kind of stuff. How about if you just add a penny per minute and you guys go and front the capital for these tools, and then we'll pay you back a penny a minute for all the calls and all the people that we have. And that keeps me from having to go and get a capital expenditure request within Best Buy, because at the time, not disparagingly, but it was a smart move on Best Buy's part to bring Accenture in and to slow down the shadow IT that was going on. But it was harder for us to get things done. But this is where the partnership went. And we said, hey, if we could just have the sales tools. And Bill, I think I remember asking you, I said, let's get your team on the development team to design these things, because they knew what they needed, right? So we would sit down in Houston in the lunchroom, and we would sit there and kind of work through this. And what should that tool look like? And what should it be called? And we ran a contest, I think, on that too, of what should we name the sales tool? And it was a video thing, and because video phone or camera phones were just coming out, and it was like this fun thing to get everybody engaged. So again, it was, how can we be creative in the moment with the relationship, not because of a contract, but because we knew that there was bigger and better and broader opportunity. So there wasn't this, let's break the back of our provider partner. Let's all grow together, right? So we looked at this thing as not as a contest to make sure that we both kind of made progress or made money out of this, versus saying, well, I'm going to inch you for a penny per minute or 2 pennies per minute, or I'm going to tell you I can only pay you 61 cents a minute versus 65 cents a minute. And that just was never this model that we brought into it. It was always, how can we do more with what we have, and then how can we do more with more. And I think, again, it's not how can you do more with less. And a lot of the AI conversations that we have today and all this stuff really drive this. How can you, burn costs out of the system, which is not a bad thing. But when you're talking about a sales program, how do you make it self-fund, and how do you make it drive the right behavior? And some of those things were just because of that fast pipe process of insights that were aggregated, bubbled up, and then reported out to the teams. I think Kenny Hunter was kind of the orchestrator of that, Scott, within our team.
Yep.
And then Patrick and Dana and the reporting folks, and really made all of that stuff work. And it just was a very group team effort, but it really was driven by the culture and the responsibility of the folks that were taking the calls and at the point of experience for the customer, which, Bill, that's where your team really enabled that change.
You can't underestimate the value of that either. You
Yeah.
think about the program back then, because of that interaction communication, we implemented Jakarta, the desktop wrapper. That was, I remember it like it was yesterday, right? So that was forward thinking at the time. We implemented embedded, not just click to call, but via invitation chat with embedded click to call. Things to disrupt and change the way we were doing business. And I remember we had discussions.
You built some Salesforce work for us when we jumped out and were working with Advanced Auto Parts, right? I mean, we took that model beyond Best Buy and went, hey, let's do that for our clients that we have with Infinite Green now too. And so again, to your point, not to interrupt you, but you really helped us enable, and we came up with it together and kind of figured out the path of least resistance, but the one that was going to be successful too.
I think you were smart on the decisions of the tools and the solutions we're using, right? Whether it was the efficiency driven by the desktop wrapper, whether it was, I remember actually, I got to interrupt this point. You coming to me and saying, are you ready we're going to turn the spigot on. Are you ready? And that's when we went through the strategically placing the phone number, using invitation chat and the embedded click to call functions. And we turned the spigot on and drove some record breaking results. And, I look now, fast forward where we're at today with AI and using voice AI, chat AI solutions, contextual text messaging. I think sometimes there's a propensity to enable the solution to lead versus really understanding that human interaction and engagement, that the two are intertwined, that you really can't have one without the other. You have to have that human element, and you guys did a good job of that, enabling your frontline employees to communicate the customer experience, the customer opportunities, and bring that realization, and then figure out how do you build your AI solution to work hand in hand. And I think you did. You're well.
We really brought the agents. Well, we brought your agents to the top of the food chain, right? Whereas before they tended to be kind of the last in the workforce that just got things done, and they still were that. But you and I talked about a lot of servant leadership activity at the time, and how you hired managers and supervisors to make sure that they were in support of their number one priority, which was the agents that were taking the calls or taking the chats. And we really flipped that model, whereas it wasn't entry level for you to be an agent. It was celebrated that you were the ones that were enabling this amazing success. And again, culturally, it just was counterculture to everything at the time, and not contract scripted, and it wasn't contractual. And, and Scott and I did take a lot of heat from our procurement folks, from our leaders. Like, how are you going to do this with this kind of activity and not having control? And, I think I overused the word trust me, or the words trust me, so many times that I think everyone went, yeah, I know, trust you. And they started, answering for me. But it really was that counterculture that we enabled in a good way, that really just, again, unleashed that power of the people, which was our brand at the time, right? Unleash the power of the people, have fun while being your best, and do those things that really meant something to the people that were doing the hard work. And flipping that over was the hard part of that. And I think you did a great job of just making it happen, but then not standing on that as being, well, okay, we're here now. we're on top of the mountain, so don't bug us anymore. There was always another mountain to get to.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
trust me, and then on the side of like, why can't they just stay out of my shit and look at the result?
Well, that was always the case.
I tell
Because
you,
the
there's so
results
many
are
things that
go ahead, Bill.
there's so many key learnings from that experience during our time together. That 7 years that went by like that, but you kicked off this conversation with just the growth from not even selling through the channel to 400 on my side, 50 agents to roughly 2,000 agents over the course. But it's those key learnings that you try to implement, develop, optimize along the way, whether it was from technology solutions, how to engage and interact and get the most out of your partners.
Yeah.
I probably learned that more from that time than any other time in my career. And I've tried to bring that forward. I think the one thing, understanding just the importance of people at every level and having them rallied around a common goal to deliver results. You can have a healthy balance of people and technology and have an optimized solution, but it takes both. And so I really believe you're forward thinking. I look at you two as the architects of that business. And I've really just tried to emulate a lot of that wherever I've gone. And I've had a lot of success in doing that. But it's those core principles and fundamentals that I think it's very easy to get away from. And you always got to bring yourself back to that.
Yeah.
These conversations and seeing you all last week just really helped ground me back onto, what's important. Why do we do this? And one of the last things I want to say is our role as leaders, we have the opportunity to make a difference in our agents' lives every day. Not just our agents, our supervisors, our managers. They count on us to make the right decisions, to make life better, to help them. We could change careers just by small deposits that we make. And I think I learned a lot of that from our interaction and time together, as well as some other great things too.
Yeah, we kind of wrote the book together.
Yeah, and I don't think, in closing, I don't think Infinite Green would exist, Bill, without you.
Yeah,
so
I would agree.
Our experience working with you in the contact center, kind of putting all that stuff together and people enabling our madness is what gave us the courage and, to really define what Infinite Green was all about, which is helping companies enable better operations, better people execution through tools, processes, people enablement, culture. It's that balance and finding the right leaders to do that. And I don't think we would have started Infinite Green without the inspiration that you provided down in the Houston Contact Center.
I would agree.
Well, I think it goes both ways. Here we are 20 years later, and here we are on a call together talking about it. And so, Jon, just what you and Scott both, I reached out to you, 2 years ago when I was drafting from scratch an RFP, RFI, vendor scorecards on an initiative I was leading to identify an outsource provider. Who did I reach out to? Yeah. Each of you. When I was at another company, I was trying to build their chat capabilities and solutions. And that's why we stayed in touch all these years. I had the opportunity to go visit you in Vegas a few years ago to help consult for the Cosmo, right? Cosmo Hotel. I've met so many people in my career, but few that I've respected and learned so much from as the two of you. You made my life better, and you made me a better operator and leader. And so I can't thank you enough. Well, as much as you said that I've done for you, likewise.
That's a two-way street, my friend. And it was, I look forward to our next engagement of whatever that is, and know that there aren't those barriers. There aren't those, those stepping stones that we have to cross. I don't think that anything really is scripted with us. I think, again, we've learned over time how to initiate this, a belief system within our clients that we have. And when we have a chance to bring you in or to tell a story, Scott and I are storytellers, as you can probably tell ad nauseum, but we share a lot about what our experiences were from a success, from a growth, from a really having to eke out and kind of carve our own path through the jungle of stuff, right? And it goes back to Welcome to the Jungle, right? And it goes back to, how are we going to script and write this thing up? And there wasn't a book, and we wrote it together. we were at risk. I know my job was at risk just because, hey, you're not using what we traditionally think, and it was a good litmus for me to not have 100% support, because I could go get support, but to not have 100% support and then for everybody to go, we'll see how well this all works. And for the results of what we built together as a group in one particular instance, I know that there's so much more of that out there for companies today as they're trying to navigate through AI and all the other craziness. I mean, back when we started our company in 2009, everyone said call centers are going away within the next 5 years because we're going to automate everything. But what happened, right? Call centers continue to grow because the human relationship, and you said this, Bill, the interaction between humans is so much more important because we're getting rid of the things that are transactional. And if I think about generationally, we have no problem going an ATM and getting money or depositing or even using our phone or whatever to do that. Whereas our parents went into the bank, right? We are now the parents who go into the bank, and that next level of generation is going to push us into different directions. But to enable and unleash that power from the next generation that can see beyond those traditional barriers is what we need to continue to unwrap from the clients and the services that we provide. Not because we think the money and the numbers and all that kind of stuff are important, but because it really does impact lives. And I look back at the people that we hired during holiday within your company. They had holidays too. They could buy gifts and they could do things for their family that they were never able to do. And I look at that as being probably my most important kind of enablement of a leader in my history of being able to know that people had holiday and they were able to buy gifts for their families and they were able to have success and be enabled by somebody having confidence in them to do something. And confidence and creativity and all this stuff is really an amazing thing that we can look back on. But I look forward to the next lightning in a bottle, as Scott said, or magic in a bottle that we can create together. And we really appreciate you jumping on, Bill, and sharing with us today.
And if you're looking
And
for
John, you could probably go back and
an
we can do another
operational
session
people
just
leader, you would be crazy not to consider Bill Hackett.
Yeah, that is true. He's the best in the business.
So, Bill, we appreciate your time and a walk down memory lane. John, Bill, thank you for the time, and we'll end it there. And hopefully, we'll figure out how to put "Welcome to the Jungle" bumper music on the front of this broadcast.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, great.